Have you ever wondered how a country as vast and resource-rich as India came to struggle economically for centuries? Welcome to the fascinating journey of India's economic past. In the annals of history, India was once referred to as the Golden Bird, a country glistening with wealth and prosperity. Its strategic location on the Silk Road, an ancient network of trade routes, made it a hub of commerce and exchange, bringing in riches from across the globe. India, with its vast reserves of precious metals, spices, and textiles, was a treasure trove that fascinated traders and invaders alike. Its economy thrived, with its GDP accounting for a quarter of the world's economy during the height of its prosperity in the early centuries AD. However, the tides of fortune ebbed, and the once prosperous nation began to wane economically. This decline was not due to a lack of resources or a sudden drop in productivity. Instead, it was a consequence of a systematic process, often referred to as the drain of wealth. The term drain of wealth was coined during the British colonial rule in India. It refers to the constant outflow of wealth from India without a corresponding return of assets. The British exploited India's resources, siphoning off the wealth to their homeland, leaving the Indian economy crippled and its people impoverished. This phenomenon played a significant role in India's economic narrative. The drain of wealth was not a one-time event, but a prolonged process that spanned over 2 centuries. It had far-reaching consequences, altering the economic landscape of the country and pushing it into a state of chronic poverty and economic stagnation. Understanding the drain of wealth is essential to comprehend India's struggle for economic independence and its subsequent journey towards economic resurgence. It paints a vivid picture of the economic injustices faced by the country and the resilience of its people. To fully grasp the magnitude of this economic phenomenon, we must delve into the depths of India's past. Our journey begins in the late 18th century, a time when India's wealth began its steady descent. Let's transport ourselves back to a time when the sun had just begun to set on the once vibrant and prosperous Indian economy. The British had just set foot on Indian soil, their eyes glinting with the potential of the vast resources and riches that lay in front of them. The year was 1757, and the Battle of Plassey had just concluded, marking the beginning of British rule in India. Fast forward to 1765, a pivotal year in our narrative. This is when the East India Company, a commercial entity, was granted the Diwani rights, essentially the revenue and civil administration of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. This marked the dawn of an era of economic exploitation, the first signs of what would later be termed as the economic drain. You see, the concept of economic drain is not merely about the extraction of tangible resources, it's much more insidious. It's about the systematic extraction of wealth, the manipulation of trade and taxation systems, and the gradual erosion of native industries, all under the guise of progress and civilization. From the mid-18th century onwards, India's resources were used not for the benefit of its people, but to fuel the Industrial Revolution in Britain. Cotton, spices, indigo, tea, you name it, and it was being shipped off to Britain, leaving Indian markets bereft. And it didn't stop at resources. Indian revenues were diverted to pay the salaries of British officials in India, who lived in grandeur and luxury while the common people languished in poverty. This was not a mere transfer of wealth, it was a calculated, systematic drain that would set the stage for a dramatic economic downfall. This marked the onset of a long, arduous period of economic exploitation that would last for nearly 2 centuries. The stage was set, the players in place, and the game of economic drain had just begun. A game that would forever change the face of the Indian economy. As the British stronghold tightened, India's economy continued its downward spiral. With the onset of the 19th century, the British deepened their grip on India, implementing policies that would further drain the subcontinent's wealth. One such policy was the infamous Doctrine of Lapse, which allowed the British to annex any princely state if the ruler was either incompetent or died without a legitimate male heir. This not only resulted in the British acquiring rich territories, but it also led to the displacement of local artisans and craftsmen who depended on these rulers for their livelihood. The British also imposed heavy taxes on Indian goods while simultaneously flooding the Indian market with British-made products. This strategy was a double whammy for the Indian economy. On one hand, it made it nearly impossible for local industries to compete with the low-priced British goods. On the other hand, it led to an outflow of wealth from India to Britain, resulting in a severe economic drain. The British also introduced the Riotwari system, a revenue collection method that placed the burden of tax directly on the farmers. This system, coupled with the frequent famines, caused widespread poverty and destitution among the farming community, further weakening the Indian economy. Perhaps the most damaging policy was the systematic deindustrialization of India. The British systematically destroyed the traditional handicraft industry of India, which had been a source of livelihood for millions. They did this by imposing heavy duties on Indian textiles and other handmade goods, while encouraging the import of machine-made goods from Britain. This led to the closure of many Indian industries and the unemployment of numerous skilled artisans. The British also exploited India's natural resources, mining coal, gold, and other minerals without investing in infrastructure or technology that could have benefited the Indian economy. The once thriving economic powerhouse was now a shadow of its former self. The policies of the British, aimed at maximizing their profits, led to the intensification of the economic drain, leaving India in a state of economic deprivation and poverty that would take decades to recover from. By the 19th century, the economic drain had reached unprecedented levels. The gravity of this economic exploitation was unfathomable, with India's wealth being siphoned off on a colossal scale. The British Empire, under the guise of colonial rule, systematically transferred India's riches to Britain, depleting the country of its resources, wealth, and prosperity. Let's take a moment to understand the magnitude of this wealth transfer. Imagine a vast river of gold, gems, spices, textiles, and countless other riches, flowing not within India but out of it. This was the scale of the economic drain. The wealth of an entire subcontinent was being channeled into the coffers of the British Empire, while India's own people were left in dire poverty. Now, let's delve into the socio-economic implications of this drain. The economic drain was not merely a transfer of wealth, it was a debilitating blow to India's socio-economic fabric. As the riches flowed out, so did the opportunities for social and economic progress. The Indian people, once proud artisans, traders, and farmers, were reduced to mere laborers in their own land. The economic drain resulted in a massive wealth disparity, with the Indian population bearing the brunt of poverty and deprivation. Moreover, the economic drain also crippled India's indigenous industries. The British systematically destroyed India's textile industry, once renowned for its exquisite craftsmanship, to safeguard the interests of their own textile mills. This not only resulted in the loss of livelihoods for millions of Indian artisans, but also dealt a major blow to India's economic autonomy. Towards the end of the 19th century, the effects of the economic drain were palpably felt. The Indian population was languishing in poverty. The industries were in decline and the wealth disparity had reached alarming proportions. The once prosperous nation was now a pale shadow of its former self, grappling with the aftermath of a systematic and relentless economic drain. The economic drain had left an indelible mark on India, one that would take decades to recover from. This period in India's history serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of economic exploitation. The dawn of India's independence in 1947 marked the end of the economic drain, but the road to recovery was long and fraught with challenges. In the aftermath of the British rule, India was left with a battered economy and the task of nation building. The economic drain had left the country's resources depleted and its industries in ruins. Agriculture, once the backbone of the economy, had been reduced to a subsistence level, unable to sustain the growing population. The newly independent government faced the daunting task of rebuilding the economy from the ground up. But it was a challenge they were ready to face. The government initiated a series of 5-year plans aimed at industrialization and economic growth. Large-scale projects were undertaken to revitalize the sectors of agriculture, industry, and services. The focus was on self-sufficiency, reducing the reliance on imports, and promoting homegrown industries. It was a slow and painstaking process, but the efforts began to bear fruit. Agriculture was modernized, industries were revitalized, and the services sector began to flourish. By the 70s, India had made significant strides in its economic recovery. The country had diversified its economy, reducing its dependence on agriculture and boosting its manufacturing and services sectors. The progress continued into the next decades, with India emerging as one of the fastest-growing economies in the world by the turn of the millennium. Today, India boasts a vibrant economy, rich in diversity and teeming with opportunities. The services sector, particularly information technology and telecommunications, has emerged as a major driver of the economy. Yet, the journey is far from over. Challenges persist, from poverty and inequality to infrastructure and environmental concerns. But with a young and dynamic workforce, a thriving entrepreneurial culture, and a commitment to sustainable development, India is poised for a prosperous future. While the scars of the past remain, India's journey towards economic resurgence is a testament to its resilience and spirit. The economic drain of wealth from India was a significant event in the country's history, shaping its economic trajectory for centuries. As we've journeyed through this narrative, we've unearthed the origins of this economic drain, tracing its roots back to the dawn of colonial rule. The British East India Company, acting as the catalyst, initiated a series of exploitative measures, siphoning off India's wealth and resources for their own gain. This marked the onset of a prolonged period of economic exploitation. As the exploitation intensified, India's economy was systematically dismantled. Agricultural practices were manipulated to suit the colonial needs, leading to a stagnation of indigenous industries. The country was transformed into a mere supplier of raw materials and a market for finished goods from Britain. The peak of this economic drain was a dark period in India's history. A significant portion of the country's wealth was being funneled out, leaving the economy in a state of destitution. The repercussions were felt across the breadth and depth of the Indian society, leading to widespread poverty and famines. In the aftermath of this drain, India was left scrambling to recover its lost economic stature. Post-independence, the country embarked on a path of self-reliance and economic reform. Slowly but surely, India began to rebuild its economy, striving to regain its former glory. The economic drain of wealth from India is not just a tale of exploitation and loss. It's a testament to the resilience of the nation. Despite the adversities, India has managed to bounce back and carve out its own economic path. Understanding this history not only sheds light on India's past, but also provides valuable insights into its present and future economic journey. As we move forward, it's essential to remember the lessons learned from this period of economic drain, ensuring that history does not repeat itself.